Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the California High-Speed Rail Authority's Board of Directors meeting this December 16th. Can we begin today's meeting? And by the way, and wishing all of you a happy holiday season. At this point, Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Director Schenk?
Present.
Chair Richards?
Here.
Director Camacho?
Present.
Vice Chair Miller?
Here.
Assembly Member Arambula?
Here.
Director Perea?
Here.
Director Guillemetti?
Present.
Director Escutia?
Here.
Director Williams? Director Pena?
Here.
Senator Gonzalez? Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mo, and welcome all of my colleagues to the board meeting. If we can bring the flag up, please, and a flag salute. If you repeat after me, I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United
United
States of America
and to the
and to the
republic
republic
for which
which
it stands,
stands
one nation,
One
One nation, under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we start the agenda this morning, and as you know, we start with public comment, I just wanted to make a quick comment and to say that on behalf of this board, thanks to all of our management and staff, all 295 of you, for your commitment and devotion and hard work in advancing high-speed rail for all of us in the state of California. You represent the best that the state has to offer, and we're very proud of each and every one of you. We wish you and your families a very pleasant and fulfilling holiday season, and we'll see you all in 2022. With that, we will now start our public comment, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, all. Welcome to the California High-Speed Rail Board of Directors public meeting. Today, we are hosting this meeting remotely via the Zoom application. In a moment, we will begin public comment. First, we want to run through some important technical aspects of this meeting for offering public comment. If you are logged into this meeting via the Zoom application, please use the raise your hand feature typically located at the bottom of your screen so that I may call on you to provide your comment. If you're dialing in by phone, pressing #2 will raise your hand and put you into our queue. Speakers will be called in the order that their hand is raised. Once you've been in the queue and your name is called, in the web meeting, please click the prompt on your screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. On the phone, we'll call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you'll hear a message that you are being unmuted. Once unmuted, it will be your turn to speak. Please slowly and clearly say and spell your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you represent. After your introduction, each speaker is allotted 2 minutes to provide their comments. I will interject at 1 minute and 45 seconds to provide a 15-second warning. Our co-reporter is also on the line to record these comments. If they need you to spell or repeat something, they may interject. Once again, I will notify you when your time is nearly up. At the end of your comment, we will disable your microphone. However, you're welcome to stay on the line to continue watching or listening to the meeting. If you do not wish to provide comments, simply want to watch the meeting, you can do so by logging on to hsr.ca.gov and looking for the link to our live stream. Mr. Chairman, first up for public comment, we have Tessa Woodmansey. Tessa Woodmansey.
Good morning, Ms. Woodmansey.
Thank you. Tessa Woodmansey, TESSA WOODMANSEE. Thank you so much. What? Oh, okay, good. And, my comments in regards to the high-speed rail, I mean, I am supportive of high-speed rail to some degree, because it will get us out of airplane travel is what we need to do in terms of our climate crisis. We need to stop flying, stop driving, stop the movement of goods. However, the issues of connecting Los Angeles to the Bay Area are maybe a moot point as well, as because Los Angeles is going to become uninhabitable in terms of the heat and issues like that. So, we need to be a hyper local society really, and really reduce our plans to, be very hyper local, which would be bicycle and walking is our range. And so but then getting back to the reality that most probably you're going to go ahead and do this because that's how we are as humans, a lot of hubris in thinking we know what we're doing. But anyway, in terms of my neighborhood, I've talked to you guys about moving it away from the rail because I'm right on Stockton Avenue, and that's our neighborhood that I represent is the Garden Alameda Village Association that I'm the president of. And so basically we wanted it to move for that 100 feet east and build it on, whatever pier blocks you have to build it on to move it away from the train tracks. And the benefits of that is that it would reduce the noise, that you wouldn't have to ring the bells, in terms of grade crossing. So that was one of the benefits of it. The other benefit is less people live 100 feet. It's more
15 seconds
industrial
remaining.
right there. So that's my suggestion.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, next up for public comment, we have Cindy Bloom. Cindy Bloom.
Good morning, Ms. Bloom.
Hello, good morning. Can you all hear me?
We hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Hi. Okay, so I'm against a high-speed rail because I think it's not going to affect climate change because it can't happen until 2060 due to all the construction impacts. But I'm going to give you a brief overview. What we voted for in Prop 1A was a 220-mile high-speed train with a 520-mile route connecting San Francisco to Los Angeles with a budget of $45 billion. That was per Prop 1A. And with a requirement that $9 billion of the $9.95 billion bonds be matched by public and private funds. And this is what we got 13 years later. We got a not high-speed train that will have to share miles of blended tracks at speeds ranging from 40 miles per hour to 80 miles per hour, a scaled-back initial operating segment of 171 miles connecting Merced to Bakersfield with a budget of $99.9 billion, almost $100 billion, with no private funds secured, plus an $80 billion funding gap that needs to be filled to actually build out the full line. And we need to address climate change now, and the high-speed rail is not the answer, as any net positive effects will not be realized at least until 2060, if ever. Construction operation have already had and will continue to have negative unmitigable impacts on the environment and local communities. And the project has suffered from continued mismanagement as confirmed by the California State Auditor, who entitled her audit report, California High-Speed Rail Authority. Its flawed decision-making and poor contract management have contributed to billions in cost overruns and delays in the system's construction. The project budget has already skyrocketed from $16 billion to almost $100 billion with no end in sight. And I yield the rest of my time if there is any.
Thank you, Ms. Bloom.
Mr. Chairman, I'm briefly going to go over the instructions. We had a few attendees join after they were given the first time. For attendees who wish to provide public comment at the moment and have joined us via the Zoom application, please utilize the raise your hand feature, which is typically located at the bottom of your screen, so that I may call on you to provide your comment. Mr. Chairman, none of the attendees have motioned to raise their hand after the instructions were given, and we have not had any new attendees join.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Colleagues, will now move into the agenda for today. Agenda item number 1 is the approval of our November 18th meeting. If there are no changes, can we have a motion and a second, please?
Second.
Director Camacho on the motion and Vice Chair Miller on the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well, I'll tell you what, we better, are you there, Mr. Secretary?
Of course, Mr. Chairman.
I think we better call the roll because I'm not sure I can hear everybody.
Yes, sir. Director Schenk,
Yes.
Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Camacho,
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller,
Yes.
Director Perea,
Looks like he stepped away from his chair for a moment,
Okay.
Secretary.
Director Guillemette,
Yes.
Director Escutia,
Yes.
Director Pena. I believe you're muted, Director.
Thumbs up for Director
Yes.
Pena.
Mr. Chairman, the motion carries.
Thank you. Item number 2 on our agenda today is the expenditure authorization request, and I'm going to ask Brian Kelly if you would introduce the presenters.
Yes, I will, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Good morning, board members. Brian Annis will present on item number 2 on the agenda. This is an expenditure authorization request for us to move forward with the work that we have in front of us as we head into 2022. Typically, after we adopt a business plan, we will come to the board to do a formal revision of our budget in its entirety. Although this year things are a little bit different for a couple of reasons. One, our 2020 business plan, due to COVID, carried into 2021. So this is a business plan that's just came out in April, adopted formally and presented publicly in May of 2021, earlier this year, just 7 months ago. And as members know, we are in a ongoing conversation with the legislature about elements of our program as we go forward. And so our plan from a management level is to come to the board today for an authority to expend certain funds to make sure that we can move forward on the construction we have underway in the Central Valley, and to move forward with the things we're coming back to the board on as early as January, namely some of the contractual things, RFQ and procurements for advancing the design to extend into Merced and Bakersfield in the Central Valley, and also to come forward with the new RDP or Rail Delivery Partner contract that we'll also be coming to the board with in January. So we want to make sure that we have the funding in our budget to do those things. We have highlighted all of these issues, the contract work we have in front of us, in the 2020 business plan that was adopted in April and submitted in May. So none of this is really new stuff. It was all identified in that business plan. And we want to come back to the board for the formal budget revision when the legislature and the governor's conversations are concluded this budget cycle. So we think it is likely that through that conversation, scope and perhaps revenue elements will change. And as that happens, we want to come back to the board for a more formal adoption of the broad budget. But for now, we want to move forward on the expenditure authority to again, advance the work we have in the Valley, move forward on the contracts we have to extend advanced design work, and move forward on the program. I don't think any of the work that we're intending to do is in conflict with anything we're hearing from legislative leadership right now. And I think our preference is to do this part now and again come back for the full budget revision when we are fully through the budget conversation with the legislature in 2022. So that's why this is before you today. Brian Annis, our CFO, will give a formal presentation and we'll be happy to answer questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
Brian.
Mr. Kelly. One moment before you start, Brian, Secretary, if you'll please reflect for the minutes that Senator Gonzalez arrived at the outset of this presentation of number 2.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. And welcome, Senator Gonzalez. Thank you for joining us. Brian Annis, you're up.
Great. Thank you, Chair Richards and directors. We have a PowerPoint presentation to go through. Brian Kelly just gave a very good outline. I'll just dive down on a couple points as we go. First off, board policy does direct staff to come to the board for budget adoption. We do that in 2 ways. We bring forward an annual fiscal year budget and a multi-year program baseline budget typically. Sometimes those occur concurrently, sometimes they occur separately. In this case, it was separate. We did come to the board this September and requested approval of the 21-22 fiscal year budget, which was adopted. While the 2020 business plan, as Brian Kelly said, was adopted in the spring, we have deferred bringing to the board a update to the program baseline budget to conform to that business plan for the reasons he mentioned. And a key one of those is those ongoing discussions with the California legislature on the Prop 1A appropriation. And clearly those the resolution of those discussions may affect scope and revenues for the project that would be reflected then in the full adoption of the program baseline budget. The next page. So at this time, we're recommending the board defer adoption of the full program baseline budget. However, to keep important work advancing and not delay work, we are recommending the board approve this expenditure authorization that would, again, allow us to move forward on some important work. And I'll walk through what those various components are as we go. Next slide. So what we're requesting here is a total expenditure authorization of $17.9 billion. That includes both prior expenditures. We've spent about $8.9 billion to date, and then future expenditures on this specified scope. What that budget would allow us to do is continue the construction work on the 119-mile Central Valley segment, including the work that's currently under procurement for the track and systems. This budget allows the completion of all environmental records of decision for phase 1 segments, the continued reimbursement to our local partners for the existing Bookend projects. And Brian Kelly again alluded to some of these big future contracts we expect to come to the board in early 2022. In January, we expect to bring forward the rail delivery partner reprocurement, now called the Project Delivery Support Contract. The current contract is expiring at the end of the fiscal year, so it's timely to bring that forward to the board. And also design contracts to advance design on Merced and Bakersfield segments. Next slide. So as way of background, this slide displays the program baseline budget that the board last adopted. The first 4 lines here on this table go back to a May 2019 board action to adopt the baseline. We came back to the board in June of 2020 with the last item on the list here. This $23 million was for some pre-construction activities outside of the 119 miles. We've used a bit of that so far on some of our early commitments associated with environmental justice communities on the Y section north of Madera. So the current total baseline budget adopted is this $15,636 million. I could go to the next slide, which is also background. This is just a reminder of what was included in the adopted 2020 business plan. If you look at the first row here, we cite that current board adopted baseline of $15.6 billion. And with the 2020 business plan, we were proposing about a $1.3 billion net change or increase due to some scope in cost increases that were due to a variety of things from COVID-19 to some scope changes required by local stakeholders and revised cost estimates as, again, were outlined in that 2020 business plan. The business plan also talked about some enhanced scope elements that were not previously included, and those include the 3 items listed here: advancement of the Merced and Bakersfield segment designs, enhanced scope for train sets, to purchase the initial train sets to certify the system, and lastly, the enhanced scope of program-wide support. And the primary thing included here would be the re-procurement of the rail delivery partner. Also included in this item is some smaller ongoing program-wide work efforts, such as from our early train operator, our financial advisor, and various other contracts we have for continuing work. Next slide. So relative to that baseline, I just walked you through on the 2020 business plan. We are proposing that with this expenditure authorization that a few changes get made. First, again, as Brian Kelly alluded to, we're proposing not to include at this time the train set contract. That's not immediately coming to the board. That's an area of interest for the legislature, so we're recommending that be deferred. Number two here, we do want to recognize the recent award of a new federal grant through the RAISE program, the $24 million for the Wasco State Route 46 improvement project. The total project cost is $76 million. We did carry in our budget before a certain amount of money for this, knowing that we had some legal commitments for this grade separation. But the way we approached it for the federal grant was really through a partnership effort. We worked with the city of Wasco, and in working with them, we found we could use a site as a staging area for the construction of this facility that was the former site of some farm worker housing that, of course, has been replaced with new housing. And through that effort, that addresses one of the important issues the city of Wasco is asking us to assist them with. And with the federal grant, we now have the funding to include the cleanup of the farm worker housing as part of getting that site ready for a construction staging area. The other part of that was we partnered with Caltrans. They had a traffic circle planned for safety purposes in the same area. And so that's also part of the scope. So again, we would incorporate the federal RAISE grant and the scope for that grant into the project expenditure authorization. Next slide. So the third adjustment we're proposing is for CP4. Of course, CP4 is the furthest advanced of the construction packages. There's no major commercial issues remaining. The scope is fully defined, and therefore the risk is reduced for schedule and other risk areas. The remaining risk is largely the third-party related issues, and there are mitigation plans in place to address each of these risks with targeted management issues. So as that one is really advanced through the process of final work, we recommend here a $48 million increase so we can match up all the current efforts and risk assessment going forward on that, and with that, some additional reporting to the board on various key performance indicators as again, CP4 is the most advanced. Lastly, and number 4 here, just want to recognize there's what I'd call technical adjustments relative to the business plan. You know, we have had some contracts expire. There's been other technical adjustments of characterizing expenditures across line items, et cetera, but those are all net zero changes. But I just want to reflect some of that technical work goes on for the passage of time. So lastly, we end up here with expenditure authorization that relative to the 2020 business plan, we've added about $75 million in a couple areas, the $27 million related to the RAISE grant on net, and the $48 million related to CP4. And then, of course, again, we propose excluding the $389 million for train sets at this time. So it ends up coming in a bit less than what was in the business plan overall, again, with that train set budget being deferred at $17.9 billion. Next slide. And again, Brian Kelly alluded to coming back to the board for a full program baseline budget adoption later. And when we do so, we expect we'll have more information, including, importantly, resolution with the California legislature on the Proposition 1A appropriation. We do have a couple pending grant applications with the federal government right now. Brian Kelly's going to walk through those in his CEO report, but we have a Fresno Historic Depot related application and also an extension of the Selma Workforce Training Center. So if we're fortunate to win one or both of those grants, we'll clearly bring those back to the board to include in the baseline. Also, as completion of CP1 and 2-3 commercial settlements are made, we will bring any changes to the board if warranted. The receipt of bids for the track and systems contract, that will be further information to inform budget. And lastly, as we have endeavored on this stage gate approach to advancing future segments, including Merced and Bakersfield segments, we'll be back to the board at different stage gate stages to adjust the budget as warranted as we go. Next slide. So this is just a summary again of what's proposed. We start at the top with the current baseline budget, and for the expenditure adjustment, we show 4 different lines of adjustment, and I've gone through those in prior slides. Again, just would note the bottom line here, we're requesting 17.937 billion of expenditure authorization to keep work going. Next slide.
Brian,
Yeah,
can I ask a question about the prior slide?
sure.
The total being 17 million, no, excuse me, 17 billion. How much of the enhanced scope program-wide support is going to the existing RDP contract for an extension? And then you include in that the early train operator for legal and financial. What is the breakout between those two?
Let me state it a little bit generally because the project delivery support contract will be coming in January. I believe it'll be around the magnitude of 400 million, but if I could defer to that presentation in January to get through the specifics of the term of it and other provisions. But just to give you a sense of, I think what the next contract will be proposed at, I believe it's around 400 million.
So are you then allocating the balance of that to the ETO contract?
No, there's a number of contracts in this area. I've given some of the larger examples, the ETO, the financial advisor. Some of these are ongoing contracts with different expiration dates. So we do anticipate having to re-procure some of these in the future as well. There's also in this a number of smaller contracts that we have with our partners, such as the freight railroads, some of the cities, some of the third parties. Again, some of the work falls into a program-wide category. So it is a variety of work with, in some cases, contracts that we might be extending. In other cases, contracts will be re-procuring.
Are we extending the RDP contract as it exists today to re-procure the new contract?
Well, again, in January, when that comes forward, it is proposed as a re-procurement in terms of the phasing, phase out if there's a new contractor, phase out of the old, phase in of the new. Defer to the project manager to walk you through the specifics of what they're recommending on that in January.
Ernie, can I jump into that for a minute
Sure.
just to help clarify the issue? A couple of things I want to point out. First, the reference Brian made to roughly 400 million, I think it's actually on the order of 385 million, is the estimate we have for what the new RDP contract may be. But that's the new one, not the current provider.
Okay.
And then, so that's just how we're budgeting that for the new partner we'll use going forward. Whoever wins that bid process, that public bid process. So that's the first part. Secondly, There will be some extension of the current RDP just to assure we have a smooth transition between the existing provision of service we get from them and then transitioning to the new. And there are some things, for example, environmental work, where we are currently working with the RDP and advancing those. For example, you guys know that we're coming to you with another ROD to be certified in January, followed by 2 more in 2022, and a couple of more as we drafts and final as we get into 23. And so we probably want to finish that work without disrupting that service provider on those things. So there will be some extension, but it'll be minuscule compared to the amount that was in the original contract, and it will not be on the order of 400 million. That will be the new service. So I just wanted to try to clarify that.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Ennis?
I believe this slide I was just going to share to illustrate how our request for 17.9 billion of expenditures ties to our projected revenue. This is a chart that's similar to one in the 2020 business plan, but due to the last 3 cap and trade auctions since the 2020 business plan, the low of our range and the high of our range has gone up. Currently, if we're looking at a 500 million a year future cap and trade, that would bring in a total of about 21 billion to the program through 2030 with our other funding sources. And the high has gone up a bit as well here at 23.3 at a 750 million range. And again, this is just to illustrate that our projected funding is sufficient for the budget that we propose here at the 17.9 billion. Next slide. This is just a bit of detail on different fund sources we would use for different components of the program. As you can see, it's a combination of Prop 1A, federal funds, including the recent federal raise grant, ARA funds, FY10 funds, etc. And the third column of numbers here at the bottom, you see totals to this $17.9 billion. Next slide. So just in conclusion here, we are asking this is an action item, and we're asking for board approval of a expenditure authorization to allow us to continue existing work and some important short-term procurements. Total would be 17.937 billion, and happy to answer any further questions the board may have.
Thank you. Could we take the PowerPoint off so I can see the other members, so I know anybody who's wanting to ask questions or make comments?
Tom, I have a couple of questions.
Yes, go ahead, Director Perea.
Okay, Brian, thank you for the presentation. Just want to confirm one thing and just ask a question on another. And I think one of your slides provided it is the issue that we had approved attached to the business plan is delaying the decision on whether we go dual track or single track, depending on what the funding will be. So that's, as I think the slide indicated, that is not covered in this request. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes. What we included in the business plan, we do have a budget for the track and systems that's budgeted at what we think the single track would cost, but that isn't to indicated board decision on that. We would, as part of the bringing the bids forward to the board, expect a recommendation and board direction on that question, again, after the bids come in.
And they're bidding dual track and single track.
Yes, that's the point. That's the point I want to make, Henry. The bids will come in both ways.
Okay. And the other question, Brian, is when you had that one slide that did have the tracking systems RFP that is currently out for procurement, can you give us a timelines for that RFP and when we expect the bids back? And then tie it to another slide you had with respect to when we're going to actually be testing and putting train sets on the line. I know those timelines have changed, and I know there's an analysis going on, but do we have any more concrete timeframes around those two?
Let me tackle the beginning of that if I could, Brian. The first is, here's what we're expecting on the bids, Henry. We think we will be receiving bids on the order of May of this year, and then an award somewhere around the July timeline. Part of that is because the legislature is also very interested in that particular procurement. They want to see that come in and be briefed on that as well, and we're committed to doing that. So we push that back a little bit. And again, we want to see both bids come in. The other thing is federal money is now available at a higher level. We think it might help us easier answer the question between 1 and 2 tracks. And so we want to see that play out. I think in the business plan, we've estimated the beginning of laying the track in the 24-25 timeline that would go forward. And I think we are testing out in around 27, 28 and trying to get to operations by the end of the decade is where we are on that. I'll have to go back and get those dates more specific, but that's roughly the order of where we are on some of that work.
All right. Thank you, Brian.
Sure.
Brian,
Yeah.
Kelly.
Yes.
Real quick question. So if you're going to bring back to us this new RFQ or RFP for the RDP contract, or however you want to call it now.
Yeah.
And so then I assume then that you've already defined the scope of work for the new entity, whoever that is.
Yes, and that's what we'll be bringing to you for your consideration in January at the board meeting, both the scope of the RFQ as well as sort of the estimates and our approach to it, because it is important to note with the current RDP partner, there is some work that we would be proposing to sort of finish with that partner, and then work we transition to the new. So the short answer is yes, in January, we'll hope to bring clarity to you on both of those questions.
And so the board, will we be briefed prior to that meeting?
Yes.
As to what it looks like? Good.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
sir.
what I wanted to find. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Jim, go ahead.
as board members, I know we've all been very concerned about what's been going on in Wasco with the farm labor camp. And now that we've got the federal grant of $24 million, I'd appreciate it if we could get a regular update as to the progress of using that grant money to satisfy the problem down there, if we could.
Happy to do it. It's going to start with an implementation plan. The first thing we'd come back and report is an implementation plan of that grant that will involve us, the city of Wasco, and Caltrans, and we'll be happy to brief that at each board meeting.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Jim. Any other questions for either Brian Kelly or for Brian Annis? Or any other comments? Hearing no more questions or requests for comments, do we have a motion for approval? Excuse me, let's say, we need a motion for approval first. I'm sorry.
So moved.
Mr. Chairman, this is Anthony Williams. I just wanted to announce that I have joined the meeting. Apologize for being a little late, but I heard most of this conversation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Tom, I don't know if you heard, I'm going to move the item as I understand staff's presentation, and I really thank you for taking this interim step while we work through our issues with our budget in the legislature and authorizing additional funds. So this will allow us to keep constructing and moving forward with the project with the funds that we have with this augmentation. So I move the item.
Okay.
And I'll second it. I'll second it. Also, Brian, thank you and the staff for making it very clear and transparent that this is an interim step.
Thank you, Director Shank. So we've got a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Director Schenk,
Yes.
Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Camacho. I believe you're muted, Ernie. Director.
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller,
Yes.
Director Preya,
Yes.
Director Guillemette,
Yes.
Director Escutia,
Yes.
Director Williams,
Aye.
Director Pena?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, members. Moving on to item number 3 today is the Southern California project update. And Brian Kelly, if you want to introduce this again, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, just by way of reminder, we have done updates on our work in each of the regions that we are active around California. You may recall in October, we updated with our regional director, Boris Lipkin, on our activities in the Bay Area. In November, we did a rather extensive construction update in the Central Valley. And now here in December, as we promised, we are here to present our activities that we're working on in Southern California, the LA region. And there's really quite a lot going on, much of which we'll be back to the board on as early as next month for various approvals. I'm also very pleased to reintroduce to the board, I know you've met her before, but our regional director in Southern California is LaDonna DiCamillo. And LaDonna will head up all of our work down there, and she's doing a terrific job for us, working closely with our environmental team and the communities and others. And with that, and without further ado, I just want to hand it to LaDonna to go through the update on our Southern California activities. So LaDonna, welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Brian, and good morning to the directors. I am happy to give you an update on the status of what's happening in Southern California, and we have been doing a lot over the last year. So very excited to share our progress in Southern California. First, I want to virtually introduce our team, our Southern California team on the first slide. We've just filled our last position starting December 1st. So we have our team in place. We're excited about the opportunities to improve communication with stakeholders down in Southern California, and we're excited about the team and what we can do. Our second slide is an overview of the team that is shepherding our environmental documents. We've made tremendous progress this year, and that's what we'll be walking through in this presentation today. But this is our RDP team that's in charge of the multiple experts that are putting together these environmental studies. So just a brief reminder on our next slide, Southern California is divided into 4 sections, and this will show Bakersfield to Palmdale, Palmdale to Burbank, Burbank to Los Angeles, and Los Angeles to Anaheim. And you can see on this slide, we have potential connections with Brightline, the private sector high-speed rail provider who's planning to build from Victorville into Las Vegas. And you can see with the dotted lines, potential connections to our system as well. And then in yellow on this map would be a phase 2 alignment, potential alignment into San Diego. Our next slide. Those 4 project sections actually touch 13 different congressional districts, 12 state senate districts, 15 assembly districts, 22 cities, 4 counties, multiple supporting agencies are involved, and these are just a few of those. And then, of course, we can't forget 2 freight railroads that we work very closely with. All of this to support the approximately 23 million residents in Southern California. So diving in a little deeper to our first project section, Bakersfield to Palmdale. This is an approximately 80-mile project section. This was before the board in August. In August for approval of the final environment connecting the Bakersfield station to the Palmdale Transportation Center. The record of decision was signed on September 3rd. The team put together the last round of communications and outreach for this involved 5 rounds of community meetings, 6 stakeholder working groups, 2 hearings, and we did 2 special listening sessions in addition to a number of one-on-one meetings. So we're excited about the opportunity to, now that this environmental work is cleared and complete, we've identified some potential early start projects in this section, and we're excited about the opportunity to move forward with those projects. Moving on to our next section, Palmdale to Burbank. From an engineering standpoint, this is a challenging section for us. This will involve tunneling through the Angeles National Forest. The team has worked for several years with the community to identify some proposed alignments, which you'll see on the map. The color that I'm going to call hot pink is where we would have tunnels, and the green would be where we are above ground. Our preferred alignment is actually the second from the top. It goes out, it kind of goes out around Una Lake. Thank you. And it would be that alternative. But we are advancing in this draft document 6 potential alternatives. The draft document is being finalized as we speak and should be available for the public early next year. We're targeting February. So we're very excited about bringing this particular section together. It is a major game changer for Los Angeles. It takes what could be a 2-hour drive, sometimes with traffic, into a 30-minute train trip. So we're very excited about the opportunities with this particular section. The next slide takes us to our Burbank to Los Angeles section. It's a 14-mile section connecting the Burbank Airport with Los Angeles Union Station. This particular corridor is an existing rail corridor occupied by Metrolink, Losan Amtrak, and the Union Pacific, and we'll be adding 2 tracks to this corridor. It's a fairly short corridor, but in a condensed population. We've been doing active outreach in this corridor. Our final environmental document was published on November 5th. And so this document will be before you for consideration in January. So the team is actively out now, holding meetings with those who have commented, as well as just other stakeholders in general. Up to this point, most recently, we've held 5 open houses, 2 stakeholder working groups. We have a database of over 400 for that stakeholder working group. And like I said, we're ongoing meetings with this particular section. So you will see that for consideration in January. And then to our 4th and final section, connecting Los Angeles Union Station to Anaheim, to the Anaheim Arctic Station. This would be a 30-mile station or 30-mile section with 4 stations or stops that are shown with the circles. We're proposing a 4 mainline track system with 11 new grade separations, and the outreach has been extensive here already. We do not have a draft out yet. This is a rather complicated section for us because it not only involves our operations, but this particular corridor is currently occupied with 3 tracks that are shared by BNSF Railway, Losan operations, Metrolink operations, and several others. And in order to accommodate our 2 tracks that we need, we actually need to remove some freight trains from this corridor. So we have added 2 additional components to this project section, and we'll be studying an intermodal freight facility for BNSF. So with the next slide, I'm going to give you kind of an overview of how that all works together. So currently, as this is a depiction of where Colton is in the Inland Empire. It's the orange dot within that orange square. And I think we have a graphic that we can run with this slide that shows you that currently, as trains come into Southern California, generally bringing empty containers into California, they'll come through Cajon Pass along what I call the 91 corridor to BNSF's Hobart Rail Yard, where those empty containers get offloaded and trucked back into the Inland Empire, into Ontario. What we're proposing to do is to stop those trains short. And so those warehouses that would be served in the Inland Empire could be served from the Colton facility rather than from the Los Angeles Hobart Yard. So what this does is overall reduce freight vehicle miles traveled, but it does add a complicated intermodal yard study for us in our environmental document. So in my next slide, you can kind of see this a little bit maybe more graphically. If you were to fly into the Ontario airport, you would see a lot of warehouse rooftops. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to show with this slide. Ontario being the large black circle in the middle. There are a lot of warehouses in the San Bernardino area and Moreno Valley as well. And so those would be in closer proximity to the proposed Colton component. We also have a component in the Barstow area called Linwood, where we'd be adding some staging tracks for BNSF to hold trains. If there's construction going on within the LA basin, it would just be a place for them to add some trains. But this is really the focus of what is complicating the study here. An important component, though, to add or create the capacity that we need within that Los Angeles to Fullerton corridor. So moving on, we are continuing to work on the Bookend projects with Link US or Link Union Station. The team is working on a funding agreement for that. And I think I have a slide that shows a little bit better what that project's about. We are also contributing to shared corridor improvements. So from Burbank to Anaheim, we will be working in shared corridor, and our improvements will accommodate the volumes that are anticipated by the 2018 State Rail Plan. So we've taken the volumes of all the different passenger rail operators as well as freight that are in those corridors and put together a plan that will accommodate the full volume of those. And so our environmental study will also be helping with accommodate with Metrolink and LoSAT and others. Connectivity projects include that we've contributed to include a Metro Regional Connector, which is a light rail connector in downtown Los Angeles. We've helped Metrolink acquire some Tier 4 locomotives, and we've invested with Metrolink in positive train control. And then the last bookend projects that we'll talk about is a safety improvement at the Rosecrans Marquardt grade separation, and I've got a good slide on that one as well. So moving to the next slide is a depiction of what Union Station will look like when complete. If you are to take a train into Union Station now, those are dead-end tracks. They dead-end at the 101. And what we're proposing at Union Station will be to make them run through. So that trains, as they come in, they can just go directly over the 101 and back onto the track rather than having to back out of Union Station. It's estimated that this is about a 60% efficiency gain for passenger trains coming into Union Station. So we're proud to be working with Metro on this phase A of the project, which will also include 2 platforms for our passengers at Union Station. And then the next slide is a depiction of Rosecrans Marquardt, which is currently an at-grade crossing a T intersection for vehicles with diagonally a train going right through it. So you can see how complicated that crossing currently is. And again, this is a project with Metro. We're working with Metro to completely grade separate that, and it'll improve safety. This is one of the highest incidence crossings in the state. So we're contributing $77 million to this grade separation. Metro has about finished their procurement and are hoping to award a contract for that project yet this year, and they would begin construction in March or April. So summarizing where we're at with our environmental documents, Bakersfield to Palmdale, we've completed that 80-mile section and working we'll soon have Burbank to Los Angeles to you in January, anticipated at the January 19th to 20th board meeting. Palmdale to Burbank, that draft should be out early next year, and the Los Angeles to Anaheim project section draft still being written, and we're hoping to have that released in the fall or winter of next year. So with that, moving to next steps, I think my next steps are next slide. Once we complete our environmental work, we'll be able to do advanced design, and the team is already identifying some opportunities where we might have some early start projects, both on Bakersfield to Palmdale as well as Burbank to Los Angeles. And we're working with our local regional partners to target what those projects would be, predominantly grade separation. There's an opportunity in what we call the Malabar Yard. It's actually BNSF has some storage tracks in the Union Station area that we would like to permanently relocate. And then we would relocate them, proposing to relocate them to what's referred to as Malabar Yard. And it's important for overall passenger operations in and out of Union Station long term. It's an opportunity to create some fluidity around there, and we will need to have that operation permanently relocated when we come through. So Metro also is currently in the process of reviewing their regional priorities, and we're talking to their teams, and we'll put our heads together and hopefully come up with a good list of some priorities that we can agree on, and proceed with competitive grant funding applications moving forward. So I think that's it for me. Happy to answer questions or revisit anything I might have missed.
Tom, I'd like just to make a real quick comment. LaDonna, that's a great presentation. Thank you very much. And it reminds us that we are actually coming into Southern California and then moving out towards San Diego. So I appreciate your presentation and the information, which was very, very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tom, I have a
LaDonna?
question.
Oh, go ahead.
Or Henry? did you
No, go
wanna
ahead.
Tom,
first?
I think you're on mute.
Go ahead, Director.
Thanks, sorry.
Shall I go forward? I'm
Yes.
sorry. Okay. I just have a question, and I think it's Colton, the new warehouse center that you're talking about, I guess, east of Ontario Airport. Does that increase truck traffic to get goods to those warehouses, or are you looking at that?
It's an intermodal freight facility, and BNSF is currently evaluating. Well, they're doing their analysis of where they think their customer base would be, and will be providing us that information. Overall, from a regional standpoint, we anticipate that it will be reducing truck miles, but it may be changing truck traffic within that particular area. And so we're in the process of studying that.
Okay, and you're working with the Port of Los Angeles, I'm assuming, on that as well, since I know they are delivering to railways as well.
Not directly for this project, because all of the containers that would be handled at that Colton component would be coming from warehouses domestically, so not directly from the port.
Oh, so moving their yard, the one that's closer to downtown, that doesn't involve any port activity?
Won't be a direct involvement. It's
It
not a
won't be.
direct, because the port, containers from the port, I've always wanted to do a graphic like this, and it's difficult, but containers from the port are going to warehouses to be changed and repackaged. Every warehouse is unique and different, and something different happens at that warehouse. It might be put from a 40-foot container into a 53, but then it's from that warehouse that it goes to the rail yard, and that's the portion that we'll be working with BNSF to study.
Okay, all right. I think my point was just the relocating of the one that's more downtown, just to make sure that that doesn't have an effect on either the port or then additional truck traffic now having to travel east, right? Okay, thanks.
Right.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we will not be adding any aggravation
Understood.
to the supply chain.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, this is
Gonzalez?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Gonzalez, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Director, excuse you.
Yes, I'm glad that Senator Gonzalez is on this meeting. You know, she is the chairwoman of Senate Transportation. She also represents Long Beach, the Port of Long Beach. And when we're dealing with truck traffic coming from the combined ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, it's my understanding that as they travel on the Alameda corridor, they travel somewhere into downtown LA, where basically they change rail tracks in order for them to travel east along the 10 freeway, and therefore east onto Colton and all those areas. So I think we should definitely, talk to the port authorities of both the combined ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. Truck traffic is getting out of control here in Southern California. and we just don't want to add to that. Second of all, two issues just as a heads up. There's a very large movement that's community-based in Colton, precisely because the people are just fed up with that area being used for warehousing and basically all the environmental impact that causes. So that's a major problem, and we should be aware of it. And then thirdly, the yard in Malabar, that concerns me. I don't know much about it, but Malabar is by City Terrace in the east side of Los Angeles. And so again, we have to be concerned about environmental justice concerns, not only in Malabar, but definitely in Colton. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Director Scusa. Senator Gonzalez.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think Vice Chair Miller and also Board Member Scutia mentioned a few things that I had on my plate as well, especially as it pertains to the intermodal facility. But Ms. Regional Director DiCamillo, thank you so much for the great report. It does give us a good overview of what is actually happening in Southern California, which is very promising. And I do agree, it would be good to get some more information and more input from our port authorities, both of them, as you know them very well, to understand what the trajectory looks like for the train traffic and truck traffic, et cetera. Since the intermodal facility discussion had been addressed, I guess my only question on that is, what is the timeline for the study to come back and for us to kind of review what that would look like in detail?
Good question. The draft environmental document we're targeting to have out at the end of next year. It would be a year plus, maybe a little over a year between draft and final. So we're probably looking at a 2-year timeline to get that final document in front of you.
Okay, great. And do we have ridership forecasts at all for the segments, or are we still working on that? Just to get a bigger picture for Southern California on what else is to come and how exciting this would be.
I know we do, and it's not my, yeah, Brian.
Yeah, LaDonna, let me just comment on that. We have ridership estimates that we've used for some time here at the authority now that are tied to a ridership model we use with the California State Transportation Agency as it relates to the state rail plan. That model is being updated right now. And so we have our broad numbers from before that we can probably attempt to do segment by segment. But the better news and what we're really driving at now is there's a new model that's coming forward on the ridership that updates the state rail plan, including our impact on that plan and how our service works with that plan. And we'll be doing more refined, more dynamic ridership modeling on that during 2022 that we will bring back in our 2023 project update report. So we do have some ridership modeling that's sort of higher level in general as it relates to specific segments, but we are looking to make that much more dynamic and more specific with the updated models that's coming in 2022.
That sounds great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any other? Yes, Ernie, did you have something else? Okay.
I have a question, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
Director Perea.
Yeah, excellent presentation by our staff. If you could go back to that one slide, I know we talked about it in my briefing, the one that shows the investments of the high-speed rail board in the Los Angeles area. Could you go back to that one?
Slide 13?
I believe it was, yeah.
While they pull that up, I have it in front of me.
Yeah, okay. I guess the only point I want to make as that slide goes up is that I think sometimes some elements of the media have maybe inaccurately reported that our high-speed rail group we have not been making investments in the Los Angeles area. But and I think it's pretty clear just based on your overall presentation, we are. It just takes time to get there. But I think these are real hard dollars of investment that we've made. And I think we just need to make sure that the local media and the media in that area is aware of these types of investments. But again, thank you.
Will do.
Thank you, Director Perea. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Vice Chair Miller.
I would just like, LaDonna, maybe for you to come back to us periodically. I know we have a fairly long time frame on the completion on this particular document, and I'm talking the two complicated ones that you addressed today, to maybe bring that back periodically, just so that we can understand how it's going in terms of the alternatives and with our partners and the public, so that we're not just at the end of the 2 years trying to approve a document. So I see
Nancy,
Brian shaking his head, so that.
Nodding my head.
Nodding, yes, right.
Because I do want to say, Nancy, that one of the complications or the important elements there is the work we're doing on the LA to Anaheim part is really about freeing up passenger rail on one stretch, and for us to do that, there's an impact on freight that we have to manage. And I just say that because it involves not just us, but the California State Transportation Agency, probably likely dollars from trade corridor related funding options that we have. And so as we go forward and as we advance that, and as we take into considerations the things that both Senator Gonzalez and Senator Escutia raised, yeah, we do want to come back and we do want to talk about where that's going and how we're addressing these things as we go forward. So I appreciate that question, that suggestion, and I think it's the absolute right thing for us to do because it's so complicated and it involves several partners. And so you can count on us coming back on that.
Thank you, Brian. I was going to say exactly what Vice Chair Miller said. It's, and you used the word complex. It's complex and complicated, and those two things are really different. And it's really going to be, there's going to be real cost ramifications from it all. And obviously, we're going to have to take a very close look at how we're interrupting operations in Southern California and the people in and around the areas that we're talking about. So I'm wondering, Brian, if you'd give some thought to, I would think that we would like an update, certainly not more than 6 months from now, unless there's so much going on in the interim that it should be.
Yeah, I mean, Tom, I think it might be worthwhile to do it quarterly because I think there's I think we want to look at, are we examining all the best options there? We want to talk about that. Obviously, we're going to have a draft document come out. We want to be able to update that. And so, and there's a lot of communication between us and agency and others on how we advance that particular section. That particular section is tricky just because of the freight elements there, and that involves a lot of partners. So yeah, I think quarterly at a minimum is good.
All right, then we'll start looking forward to seeing you, LaDonna, every quarter for the next few.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And a great presentation. Moving forward, we'll move on to our next item, which is our CEO update. So Brian, you're back on.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I indicated to the board in the background materials, there were just several things I wanted to update the board on. Many of them I think but I wanted to put it all together in a condensed sort of here's what's happened between our last board meeting and our current one, as well as some things that we're working on going forward. So if I could just move to the next slide. One, I know we talked about this in a closed session, but we did have a very favorable appellate district court decision on a long-standing litigation matter where there was a challenge to a bill that was passed that really enabled us to be funding partners with the Caltrain electrification project in the Bay Area. And this decision said that the use of the funding for that purpose and the partnership that we created with the legislature to enable that to happen was indeed constitutional because it did not interfere or destroy the single object or work that is distinctly specified in the Bond Act. And so it was, in other words, consistent with the purposes of the Bond Act. And that's important as we move forward our work in other parts of the state. So it was a very good decision. The opponents have filed, my understanding, for a rehearing on that matter, but we feel pretty confident about where that is, and it was a positive decision. So I just wanted to update the board again that was an important appellate court decision for us. And we had won at the lower court. Now we want to get at the appellate court. And again, it really holds up the model for how we are going forward segment by segment on this program. Next slide. Commissioners Perea and Directors Perea and Chair Richards were joined us recently for a visit by the Federal Railroad Administrator, Acting Administrator Amit Bose, who came out and visited our construction site on Tuesday, December 7th. So I want to thank you both for making time to come out. It was nice. It was good to see him talk to workers about how important the project is for them and their families, but also to see the progress. This is a picture of him and our directors at the top of the Cedar Viaduct, which is the structure that is goes over Highway 99 coming out of downtown Fresno. The FRA Administrator sent me a note thanking us for that tour and the time, and he was impressed with the advancement of construction. So again, it was a good visit, a good opportunity to expand our partnership with our the FRA, our federal partner. And again, I just want to thank you both for coming out to that. Next slide. Brian Annis reported this to our Finance and Audit Committee earlier this morning, but I wanted to just make sure the board had this information wholly. Remember that we get quarterly auction results from the cap and trade program, and they've been getting better and better, certainly since the COVID-19 pandemic, but now they're really reaching stages of record highs out of the cap and trade auctions. And it's good to report that our last auction in November netted about $323 million for this project, which would have us, I mean, if each quarter was like that, we'd be at about $1.3 billion a year, which is phenomenal. So again, we're seeing very good proceeds here that are coming out of those auctions and stabilizing available funding to this project going forward. Remembering that cap and trade is our only true ongoing source of money for this project, as opposed to being sort of one-time bond money or as we get it grant federal money. It's important that this is stable and that this is strong, and we're seeing that in recent auctions. So again, the November auction was extremely strong, the highest we've had yet, and we're hoping that continues for some time. Next slide. We reported to the board members, I think in our October meeting, although it may have been, I think it was October, that we were successful in receiving the RAISE grant for the work in Wasco that we're doing around State Route 46 in the Wasco area. And that's really enabling us to take care of, as Brian reported earlier, how we handle the parcels that involve the former farm worker housing stuff. So that was an important grant for us, and we're very pleased about that. The federal government, in the meantime, since our last hearing, has come out with an announcement for availability of new CRISI grant applications. And these are new applications that the federal government has for advancements of certain work. And again, our position right now and the way we're looking at federal money is anytime a notice of funding opportunity or a notice of funding announcement comes out, we intend to participate in that. And so with the CRISI grants, we're seeking two that we've applied for. One is to help us fund the capital improvements to the Fresno high-speed rail station renovation. That picture there is the picture of an historic building that is the kind of the former station in Fresno. That'll be an important part of the new Fresno station as we go forward, the preservation of that historic building. It needs some safety, seismic, and accessibility upgrades. So we're seeking a CRISI grant for that purpose. And those applications are in, and so we're looking forward to those. The second CRISI grant application that we put in, if I can move to the next slide, is to continue the important apprenticeship program that we've started down in the Selma area. Henry was most involved in this, and we have funded that for a year now. We've extended with our own funding through another year. We're seeking CRISI grant funding so that we can extend that program even further into 2025 and 2026. And we would still continue to fund some of it with our funding, but we're seeking a federal match to match the dollars we're putting at this to make sure we can continue this really important worker development program. And so that's the second element of CRISI grant applications that we forwarded to the federal government. Next slide. This is just an update on we've talked a little bit in the earlier when Brian Annis was reporting about what we're doing on the future RDP, or what we call the Program Delivery Support contract. We put that scope of work will come out for that contract in late December. We'll be back to the board of directors to approve the request for qualifications for this. In January, we'll do briefings between now and that January board meeting to all the board members about, as we talked about with earning scope issues and what this looks like and how we'll translate or transfer from the current structure with our current RDP to whatever is next. And then you see that we'll go into, once we put the RFQ out, we'll have pre-bid meetings and small business outreach meetings with industry. Statement of qualifications will be due in May. We'll bring it back for an award in July, and then ultimately a notice to proceed in July as well. So that is the status of the program delivery support contract that we're coming out with, and there'll be a much more detail on this with you as we brief the board on this and bring it to the board in January.
Brian?
Yeah.
One question, are we going to award in May based on a statement of qualifications or?
Statement of qualifications are due from industry to the authority.
Okay.
And then as we go through those and we qualify folks and score those, we'll bring to the board how those have been scored and bring to the board the ability to.
So we're not gonna go out to an RFP then?
No, not in this is a A&E contract. Typically, we do this with an RFQ process.
Okay.
Brian, this is Martha Scutia. On the question of statement of qualifications, and I apologize ahead of time because I was not present at the last board meeting. But this question of qualifications, does the issue also include the discussion on conflict of interest?
Yeah, I mean, the conflict of interest issues, which we talked about at some length before at the last hearing, these come up. Generally, these come up once the scope of the RFQ is available to industry. They then look at what any work they're doing for us now and whether or not they'll be eligible to do other work for us, or whether they are partnering with a team that does work with us, whether or not they'll want some clarification on how they can apply for, be a part of this procurement. Those questions come to us, we give them to our legal office, and the legal office then works directly with them, with the inquiring entities about how they can or cannot participate. And I think we reported last month that we received on the order of 7 inquiries to date. And as we go forward, our legal team will be working with those entities on those inquiries. Now, I say that, I'd also say I think there will be in the document itself likely areas of, I don't know if I would say conflict of interest per se, but performance and perhaps some conflict stuff. But generally, that's how we're dealing with the conflict of interest issues.
Thank you.
Brian, who's the current RDP?
Current RDP is WSP.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next slide. I think if I can move to the next slide, guys. Next slide. This is a brief video that I wanted to show the members. Again, this is a short one that actually leads to a longer video that we won't go through here. But this is every year at the end of the year, we do a year in review of the work that we've done on the project. What you're going to see here is essentially for lack of a better term, a brief trailer. It's about 1 minute and 20 seconds. But it then goes to our broader full year in review video that we produced in-house here at the authority, that's available on our YouTube page. And the link for that is available on our website. And so this is not the whole video. That's a much longer thing, but this is just a little bit of a teaser for what will be at the YouTube video for our year in review. And I believe we're making that available publicly and making sure that people are aware of it later today. So this is a brief trailer. I just wanted to show the members that, again, will link to our broader and more lengthier year in review video. So with that, Justin and team, do you want to run this?
A year of exciting accomplishments for the California High-Speed Rail project. milestones were made in construction, environmental clearance, and job creation.
By just having this project, it's opening so many opportunities for so many people.
Some familiar faces got to see our project up close.
This is the future. This is the future of transportation in California.
As we reconnected with an enthusiastic and engaged federal partner who is making a historic investment in infrastructure.
I see a lot of progress here, and for me to experience it and see it firsthand is so important.
And for the first time in nearly 2 years, we hosted in-person outreach events.
I truly believe that public transit is going to help connect the state, and I think high-speed rail is going to do it sustainably.
As we look back at the year that was, meet some of the folks who are helping us make history and build for the future. It's the California High-Speed Rail 2021 Year in Review Special, and it can only be seen on our YouTube channel.
So again, the broader lengthier video will be available on our YouTube channel, and a link to that is on our webpage. But again, I just wanted to give you guys a flavor of that. The whole thing was produced in-house. Compliments to Melissa Figueroa and her communications team that put that together. And again, I think we're putting out a release to the broader public that broader video is available later today. So. With that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my CEO report. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. But again, just as you started the meeting, Mr. Chairman, I'll say back to the board members and really to all the staff involved. I also just want to extend an expression of gratitude for all the work that we are collectively doing every day here. And I also want to extend to the board my personal wishes for a great holiday season and look forward to a really good year ahead. So. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Brian. Members, we'll just finish with a quick update from the Finance and Audit Committee meeting this morning. I'll pair this with other things I've heard during the board meeting today and try to make this as painless as possible for you. With regards to accounts payable, we look at that because there are several metrics that we look at each month that give an indication of progress on the project. For the month, and the numbers we're looking at, as you know, trail from today's date. That we're looking at numbers as we always do a couple months in the past. So this is the October timeframe, October 31st. Looking at accounts payable. We look at both the numbers of invoices processed and paid, as well as the value. Both of those metrics were down in the month of October. We're watching that closely, and as you heard our lead from the RDP mentioned earlier, we would, as we do in labor, we would expect increases of this as we get into the new year. We will watch that and report that to you. With regards to cash management, which simply means what do we have in the bank? We've got about $1.7 billion in the bank. That's down about $100 million from the month before. And you've heard with some detail the results of the cap and trade audits, auctions for August and November. So when those amounts hit our books, that's somewhere in the neighborhood of $550 million that will increase what our cash balance is. On the admin budget and expenditures, our budget for the fiscal year 21-22 is $91.1 million. We've expended through 1/3 of that fiscal year, about 19.3% of that $91.1 million. With regards to our employees, we show about 33 1/3% vacancy in terms of what we're authorized and what we've actually placed. That's substantially higher than it was before the legislature's actions in September, which added another 73 positions. And I might add, in looking at an update for November 30th, that 33 1/3% drops down to about 31.2% of authorizations for additional staff funding. With regards to our capital outlay budget for the fiscal year 21-22, as you recall, our budget for the year is $2.3 billion. Our monthly expenditure for the month of October was 98 million, and that was up about 32 million from the previous month. We've expended about 15% of our budget through the first third of the fiscal year. So again, effective as of the October 31st date that I mentioned earlier. Of the expenditures for the month of October, about 31.9 million of it was for our design build contractors. On our capital outlay expenditures budget, as I meant, about 33% of the fiscal year was completed. We'd spent about 15% of the budget. Our total expenditures for high-speed rail since 2006 is about $8.9 billion that has been spent. In terms of our state match on our federal grants, we have funded the entire state, the entire state match, exclusive of about $16 million. There's about $40 million back at FRA for approval. We only need the 16 million of that to be funded in order to complete the requirement for the state match on the federal funding that we received with ARA and the FY10 transportation grant. On the contingency during the month of October, we look at contingency every month. There was the largest use of contingency was for what the board approved for the Hanford viaduct work, so that we could continue working on this superstructure. That was $50 million. The balance of the use of contingency was spread over all three of the construction packages, with a total of about $8 million spent. In terms of our Central Valley construction update, in terms of, you've heard Brian Kelly talk about our construction package design work. It's expected to be 100% completed by the second quarter of 2022. In terms of third-party agreements, we've got 576 that have been completed out of 702, or 82% of what the total requirement is. There were 25 completed in the month of, that was up by, by the by an amount of 25 from the previous month. Labor on our jobs averaged about 906 daily workers, which has been down from a high of about 1150 about 3 months before. We're watching that carefully, and again, we're looking at the expectation of increased activity in terms of labor and expenditures as we get into the first quarter of next year. In terms of construction in process, its progress, we've completed or have substantially completed 65 structures. 93 are necessary for all three of the, or for the total of the three construction packages. We are also underway or substantially complete on 86 of 119 miles of guideway. With regards to our right-of-way acquisition, there have been 1,999 parcels that have been delivered. We have a need of 2,267. There's 200, and that leaves 268 parcels that we're still working on. And with that, that is a summary of what was reported to us today, unless there are any questions that you want me to expand upon.
Tom, I do have one question.
Sure, Henry.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, real quickly, I've raised this issue before. You mentioned we have a 30% vacancy rate. That is very high for an organization of our size, and especially considering the work we have to do. Is there any way we can break away from the state hiring system to run more like a private sector firm?
You know, Henry, most of that, first of all, the reason it looks so high is because of what was allocated or authorized to us in September. And then with that follows what was authorized back at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Right.
So there's actually been quite a lot of movement on it. And most of the jobs that are being placed are placed with government workers. So I think that it doesn't sound good, but the reality is because the organization has grown in size and continues to grow in size to meet the requirements, we get this year alone, I think, I don't know if Brian Annis is still on us. Brian, my recollection was at 85 that we were allocated in July. And then now another 71, I think I said a while ago. So it's 150 roughly new positions that have been added since the beginning of July. So it's not that, I mean, if it appeared, I don't know that we can actually go to the private sector for the placement of those, but it looks like Brian Kelly wants to say something about that.
No, I just wanted to comment that we're not typically carrying that percentage of vacancy. We had that worked down well below that number earlier in the year, but then when the budget stuff passed and we got approvals for brand new staffing, it spiked back up. But we worked it down over the course of the year. I think we were at one point under 20% and dropping, but then when we got the new approval for new positions, it jumped back up. But again, we will see both an approval of new positions starting to drop going forward, because we'll be seeking less over time, and then and at the same time you'll see us through hiring reduce that vacancy rate like we were before the last batch of approved staff was awarded to us. Brian, I don't know if you have any specifics on that, but
That's right. Yeah. Well, and one consideration is a lot of the newly authorized state staff are replacing consultants. So we do retain some of the consultants until the state staff are on board, and then we let the consultants leave at that point. So in some sense, the vacancy is not as impactful as you might think, because we have consultants in several of those areas. But as we do hire state staff, that allows us to generate the budget savings, because the state staff are less expensive than the consultants. And as Brian said, we'd started early 2020 or mid 2020 with a vacancy rate in the 30s. I think we'd taken it below 20%. And then come the most recent budget, that jumped back up to above 30, but we hope to again bring that down under 20% in the shorter term.
Yeah.
So Brian, do you think with an organization our size, a 20% vacancy rate on the average is a good number?
Well, I was going to say that statewide rate does tend to be around 15%. So we do hope to achieve that, and then try to push it lower. We do have, it takes time for a couple reasons, but one is, we're fortunate to often be able to promote internally. And so that creates a little bit of a lag as well when we're hiring for a vacancy.
I do think the vacancy rate, Henry, you will see go down even below that 15%. But I just want to remind you and the board that we are in the middle of a process that we put into place here that we called Form to Function, which was a process where we went through and saw where we had consultants doing some work that is typically done by state service side. We started that transformation of the organization. And so as we go through that, we're having these periods where we're getting, a big authority for some state personnel to come on, so we can start to, I would say, right the balance of the ship a little bit. And by way of reminder, when I started here, we were about 30% state staff and 70% consultant. And today we're about 50-50. And so we're getting that to a more appropriate balance. I think ultimately, as we land that and get that right, you'll see the vacancy rate drop significantly.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Yes, Ernie, did you have something? Okay. we have asked the same question, Henry, and we get these large allocations, and that is a result of this moving form to function, where we're increasing the number of state employees and less private sector employees. So I know that we asked for the first, I think the 71 that came in September. I'm not sure that that wasn't simply done by the legislature, but I think that we're not seeing the slow movement on the reduction of vacancy that we saw, say, 3 or 4 years ago. I think we're certainly doing a more effective job, and the reason for, in addition to that, there's a specific reason for the need for the additional employees, and that's the whole thing with form to function, so that we can help control costs and employ state employees. So with that, any other questions for the Finance and Audit report? Seeing that, I'll ask any members of the board if any of you have anything that you'd like to, any comments you'd like to make at this point, or anything else. Yes.
Just wishing you all a very happy, healthy, safe year ahead, and looking forward to working with all of you in person.
Thank you, Lynn.
Yes.
Ernie?
Yeah. I just wanted to wish all my colleagues on the board happy holidays, and compliment the entire staff for all the hard work they've done for the last year, and wish them a happy holidays as well.
Thank you, Ernie.
Ditto.
Yes, Jim. Jim?
Ditto.
Ditto here.
Okay. Henry? Ditto. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you, Tom.
All the best. Thank you all very much for everything, and all the best for the holidays. Please be safe. Cheers.
You too.
Cheers.
See you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.